Hi, everyone. Hope you're all keeping well. Thanks for joining us for this next panel. A quick note before I introduce it. Did want to mention, I apologize for technical issues on the 9:30 a.m. Pacific time panel this morning. Just for anyone who wanted to attend that, that's going to be happening now tomorrow at 12:40 p.m. In the plenary session. So do join. But won't hold you too long. I'm going to kick things off straight away on this really exciting panel. I've really been looking forward to this one on the future of multimodal urban transport. We're joined by a really, really interesting lineup. So without any further ado, I'm just going to hand you straight over to your moderator for this session, Bob Bennett. Bob.
Hey, thanks, Cormac. Thanks for bringing this all together. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased today to be moderating an incredible team that will be leading us through this discussion over the course of the next hour or so. Very much so, this reflects kind of what Brenna Berman was talking about earlier today with Kent Lucas in one of the fireside chats, in that we are no longer in the world of one-to-one solutions. And to that end, I'm proud to bring together and for them to bring their screens up for the world to see. Secretary Jennifer Cohan, she is the Secretary for the Delaware Department of Transportation. She has been so since the year 2015. Prior to that, she ran the Department of Motor Vehicles there, and essentially all of the things that we need to do to make the world function, she manages for the state of Delaware, which obviously has done quite a good job of leading those efforts. We're also joined today by Jennifer Golick. She is with Swift now. Many of you met her in her earlier role while she was with Capital Metro in Austin, essentially helped revolutionize the way that city looks at bus transit as an integrated part of a greater whole. And for that, I always love when she's on a panel because I sit around and listen and try to get her to a cup of coffee afterwards. We have Enes Karassian, who started life as a transportation engineer, but he caught the entrepreneurial bug. I don't know if that was while you were at OU or if that was at a later time in your life, but at some point he struck out on his own to become the founder and CEO of ConnectedWise. We'll learn a little bit more about that as we go through this discussion. And then finally, Nick Hagemeyer is joining us today. He is currently the Managing Director of Infrastructure at Drive Ohio. Obviously, we've been watching what you've been doing quite closely since Columbus won the Smart City Challenge, and obviously the infrastructure piece is a huge part of that. He came into that job in 2018. Prior to that, he managed a lot of the ITS projects across the state of Ohio, and quite frankly, set the groundwork for Columbus's win. Columbus does not win if Nick does not exist. It's basically that simple. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and kick this thing off with that idea of the digital infrastructure, Nick, that you've done such a great job with. Secretary Cohen, I'll ask you to talk first about what is the criticality in your mind of that infrastructure and how is it best deployed? I know you guys have done a stunning example of how to do things right there in Delaware.
Sure. Thank you, Bob, and thank you to my esteemed panel members. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. And Bob, the question is perfect because this digital infrastructure is more important now than it has ever been. And I always say you never waste a good crisis. And this crisis has really put our information technology to to the test, not just on our highways, but whether it be rural broadband or even just the ability to pivot and do a lot of telecommuting. But I'm going to answer this question, talk about it with two different hats. The first hat I'm going to use is my Delaware hat. And we've been working on this for a while in Delaware. And by that, I mean, every time we built a major project, a major roadway, or we were doing massive improvements, we were laying down fiber, we were putting in Bluetooth readers to be able to, do real-time traffic monitoring ourselves. And one of the things about Delaware is we're really small, so it's really hard to get the attention of, some of the bigger cities. There was no way we were going to be, Columbus with the Smart Cities Challenge. So we've been doing a lot of things on our own, and it's been very successful. In 2015, we actually rolled out what we call the Del.Dot app, which is basically the public-facing version. The public has access to all of our information technology. We partnered with Waze so that we know the consumer is getting the most up-to-date information on travel times possible. That public-private partnership with Waze wasn't easy to come by. Governments don't like to partner with crowdsourcing groups like that because there's risk involved. But the end result was really, really amazing. And I encourage everybody to go out to the Google Store or Apple iTunes Store and look at the Del.Dot app. It gives you just a massive amount of data. With all of our real-time traffic cameras are there. Even our variable message board signs, everything that every one of them says is on this app. Every electrical charging station is on this app. You name it, cameras, that signals. We're really excited about that. And it's been a homegrown tool that we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the general public and other states for. Now, the second hat I want to wear is my ITS America. I chair ITS America, and we've been pushing something, and it's been interesting to see the metamorphosis of this conversation. It started out vehicle to infrastructure, right? How is the vehicle going to interact and communicate with the infrastructure? And then we're like, hey, it really doesn't need to interact with the infrastructure. So let's talk about V2V. It's really vehicles are going to talk to each other, but it's evolved so fast and it's moving so quickly that from ITS America standpoint, we're really focusing on V2X, which is V to everything. And we've been really working hand in hand with the manufacturers and, huge shout outs to Toyota and Ford for really being proactive and coming to folks like ITS America, the Cooperative Automated Transportation Coalition, saying, just tell us what you want in these vehicles. However you guys are going to, agree to read, that's what we will build. So I think we're at a really good kind of divergence right now with the manufacturers. The technology is the easy part, you guys. I'm sure you guys all can see this, that the technology is the easy part. The public policy piece around data security and the communications, that's the hard part that we really need to start leaning into, and we are doing that on a national level and a global level with ITS America and ITS Ertico and ITS Europe. So a lot of stuff happening in this time frame and in this airspace right now. So it's really it's exciting to be a leader right now in the transportation industry. So looking forward to continuing this conversation. But in Delaware, we've taken a huge leap forward, and we've been at it. This didn't happen overnight. we've been at it for about 20 years, believe it or not, building this IT infrastructure into our systems. And then the kind of the way it's been morphing nationally about, we started at V2I, V2X, and now it's like vehicle to everything. So very fast moving stuff. And I'm sure you guys, I know you're going to hear a little bit more about that from the other panel members.
Actually, I did take a note initially there. The technology is the easy part. First of all, I know we've got a lot of folks in the audience who are developing those technologies. So I ask you guys who are out there right now, submit to us what your ideas are. Engage us with questions and that type of thing. My sincerest hope is we get at some point towards the end of this hour to some of y'all's questions. And we all, I think, would benefit by understanding what some of those technologies are, and by all means throw it into the chat box there. However, I will pose the question to Nick. Pretty easy. I mean, no big deal with the technology. You're having a wonderful time with it there in Columbus. No worries, right?
Yeah, it works just seamlessly. I wish that was the case. I could talk a little bit about the US 33 corridor and some of the challenges that we've had, with some of our projects, and if that's all right. As far as the 33 corridor, we implemented 35 miles of 432 strand fiber along that corridor. Like I said, it's a 35-mile stretch of roadway that starts at Dublin, Ohio, which is northwest Columbus, and stretches all the way up to the Transportation Research Center through Marysville, Ohio. And as part of that fiber, it was laid in the ground pretty much for economic development and for the deployment of future technologies to be tested. Knowing that future technologies could amount to anything and everything, we really wanted to have the framework and the foundation to be able to support any of that futuristic technology that we may come across or may want to be tested along that environment. And when I say environment, that really goes from a suburban to a more rural city to then an even more rural environment. And then it also connects into the city of Columbus for a more urbanized setting as well, as you get past into the Dublin area. So we also have different weather environments as well. You can go from, sunny and cool on a particular day, and as you drive farther up the corridor, up northwest of the corridor, you traverse this ridge, and the meteorologists in the area also sometimes, refer to it as this weather ridge. And, as you cross through that, you can run into all sorts of, sleet, snow, anything like that. So we really set up this corridor to be an environment where anything could be tested. Some of the other technologies that we're looking at is deploying RSUs. We've deployed continuous coverage for roadside units along the whole corridor. So there's not one spot in the corridor where you're without RSU coverage. Looking at deploying over 1,000 vehicles, or up to 1,000 vehicles of OBUs onto the corridor and in the area. As well as, inside the Dublin area, we have the Don Scott Airport, which is very key in our deployment of our unmanned aerial traffic management solutions. So we're actually looking to monitor the lower altitude airspace to avoid conflicts with the unmanned traffic management, and looking at, people movement and package movement in that area, in that space. So it's really on the ground and in the air as far as, testing on the corridor, and that's really our approach in Drive Ohio. Some things that have kind of come out of that original ATC MTD grant for the corridor that was won by Marysville, Ohio, and the Council of Governments there were, ADS. As we talk about the automated driving systems grant and opportunities that we won there earlier this year, we talk about trucking and passenger vehicle autonomous driving capabilities. And starting out the Transportation Research Center, all of those, technologies will be tested up at that facility to prove that they're road readiness, and then be brought out onto the US 33 corridor for public road testing. We also just recently won an ATC MTD grant for our I-70 truck automation corridor. And once again, that's both focused on freight and really cooperation with host fleets and participation with host fleets and technology providers to test out those in an in-revenue service model. So getting those trucks out there with actual deliveries for railroad revenue service. And all of that technology will also be tested out at the Transportation Research Center, which is at the northwest end of that corridor, and then brought out to the public 33 roadways. As far as our AV pooled fund, we started up a pooled fund earlier this year. We just had our kickoff in August. We've got 6 states that are currently involved in that. And what we're really looking to do there is perform some data collection to support the acceleration of deployment and identify the needed infrastructure improvements, as well as identifying current automated vehicle capabilities. Really working with industry, and we really value industry as a partner, because we realize infrastructure owners can't just do this in a box. We have to actually get out there and have a partnership so we can try to achieve and kind of solve some of the challenges that industry may have right now, sort of meet them in the middle. And as far as our ATC MTD grant, that's going to really look at a road audit. So that's taking the first step towards, the automated industry and IOO partnership and collaboration. It's going to focus on developing or performing a road audit to really go out and drive vehicles up and down said certain routes, capturing all that data and realizing where the struggle points and pain points are for the technology, and then come back and provide guidance on how other states can do the same thing, and then perform data analysis on that and develop the tools for that data analysis so that we can really, like I said before, accelerate making our infrastructure more AV ready across the nation. And for that, I will turn it over to Inez to sort of talk about, what's being done on the private side as far as infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon again. Nick has discussed AV infrastructure deployment in Ohio. So I also would like to talk about transforming our traffic infrastructure to better help AVs in our cities. As we can see, with the increased need of connectivity and automation in our lives, our cities are transforming to better help to enable better means of communication. And traffic signs we currently use have been around for more than 150 years. But they are designed to communicate with human drivers. They may not be necessarily ideal for autonomous vehicles, maybe even posing safety threats in case of cybersecurity threats, in case of adversarial attacks. So eventually we will need to deploy new type of signs in our cities to assist automated vehicle driving. At ConnectedWise, we've been focusing on developing a technology that is using smart traffic signs to help AVs navigate safely in challenging environment. So these secure and encrypted signs can provide a lot more information about the roadway. It can contain that roadway geometric data, traffic safety information to better assist automated driving. So instead of just telling the AVs to stop or merge a lane, it can give a lot more information. Such technology could be actually very much helpful in urban areas. I remember we were in this automated vehicle conference in Miami downtown area. We simply couldn't drive back to our hotel because the GPS signal was blocked by the high-rise buildings. And such technology could be very helpful, maybe helping the vehicles navigate in the absence of wireless communication. So I'm very hopeful to see these similar kind of transformations happening soon in our transportation system. And I will hand it over to a discussion to Jen.
Thank you. Yeah, so I really appreciate everything that everyone has said so far. I was going to talk about kind of how some of these things have been operationalized in Austin and what's coming next. And it's, I loved Jennifer's quote about technology is the easy part, because that is something that I have found a little bit to be the opposite in my experience with some of these projects. You know, I think Austin is structured similarly to a lot of other cities where the transit agency and the city are separate entities. And there, you know, several years ago, there wasn't really too much of a relationship between the two in terms of the transportation industry. Obviously some, but over the last several years, the two entities have really developed this collaborative relationship working together. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's a real human element to that, that building those relationships takes a lot of work. And then developing the policies that support the projects comes after those relationships are built. And then those can really form the foundation of the work that's done. So I think, you know, once that's done in any kind of either a city or a state or even these, you know, multi-state regions like Nick was talking about, the next key to that is really getting like a shared, easily accessible data to share between the two entities or the multiple entities, so that everybody can really be on the same page, operating from the same set of understanding, operating from the same, you know, to come together to develop shared priorities and projects and things like that, come together to fund those projects. And, you know, a lot of the times that would be like a big capital project, like a roadway redesign, but also a lot of these technology projects, such as all just the shared smart city infrastructure, shared traffic signals, even camera systems. And that's one thing that we did have a challenge with in Austin, is that we had a big operations control center at the transit agency, and there's a big traffic management center at the city. And the way to share the information back and forth at the beginning was to call each other on the phone, you know? And, you know, I think that's going to be the next big leap in really revolutionizing, taking all of this technology and really making it just a seamless part of our landscape and our infrastructure, is having that open ecosystem of data and shared infrastructure. So that's what I'm really excited about. And I think once that happens, you know, it's a more continuous flow of getting those projects out the door. It's identifying the projects, it's implementing them, and then really monitoring them and continually being able to enhance them going forward. So I'm really excited about all of these new technologies.
That's one of the things that Secretary Cohen, you've talked quite a bit about, is the importance of cross-community collaboration. Certainly at the state level, I think you probably have a better perspective on that type of thing that Jen's talking about there. Is that consistent with what you've been seeing? And is the future happening today?
So yeah, no, Jen, I totally understand. And in Delaware, we're a little bit unique. Not most states, we own and operate over 90% of all the roadways. So we deal with a couple of municipalities here and there and local officials. But it's been actually really easy. And in Deldive, you know, we have public transportation is under us, DMV is under us, tolls are on. So when you have all those people and all those organizations in one, it does become a lot easier. The public policy side, on the other hand, you know, I have an open invite to any of you who would like to come and talk to my General Assembly, because, you know, there is the complete naysayers on this type of technology. And then there's the ones who just want to, you know, drive to the future right now. I think it's very interesting. I think the communication is hugely important. And up here in the Northeast, we are so tightly, you know, connected, and we're almost on top of each other. Just to put it in perspective for you, I have direct fiber to PennDOT. I have direct fiber to New Jersey DOT. I have direct fiber to Maryland DOT. Like I said, just because we're so tightly, you know, connected. And I chair the I-95 Corridor Coalition, which we actually had to change our name and rebrand ourselves to the Eastern Transportation Coalition, because we let Alabama and Tennessee in. And they're like, why are you letting Alabama and Tennessee? I'm like, if you're having a resiliency issue, if you're having a hurricane issue, that communication doesn't stop at state lines. That issue doesn't stop at state lines. So, you know, and you know, the I-95 Corridor Coalition, or the et cetera coalition, as we're calling ourselves now, we say sharing is caring. But being able to, you know, especially in the Northeast, where, you know, a third of the GDP comes from, and most of the, you know, a third of the population as well, being able to, even if it's something as small as, we just had an example, we had, a convention here, some of you may be familiar with it, in Wilmington, Delaware, and, we had to communicate with both Pennsylvania and Maryland, we're going to do rolling roadblocks. So, you guys tweak your signals, we'll tweak our signals. We had our TMCs constantly communicating. And I think that's really super important, especially when you're talking about this cooperative automated transportation world that we live in. If I want to take, one of my autonomous vehicles, to Philadelphia, it doesn't stop at state lines. It doesn't stop at county lines or municipal lines. So I think that open communication and doing it with technology. And again, Delaware's been at this for 20 years, laying fiber everywhere. But we still have certain areas where we have rural broadband deserts that we're still working on, which is, come to light even more now with virtual schooling. So, and it's very interesting, the perspective. That's why I love this panel so much. It's like, to me, technology, I can do it. The communication, the public policy, and the overall acceptance of it, that's the challenging part for me.
Vanessa, is that kind of what you're seeing as well in all the cities that you're working with? Is that public policy, that hurdle that you need to get over? And I guess even more importantly, that acceptance by consumers, people who are willing to put themselves into an autonomous vehicle?
Yes, Bob, collaboration is a must for our technology, since we have to work with local governments to deploy these smart signs. And sometimes it's not easy to come to them with this novel idea of changing their traffic signs. So I want to show, if you don't mind, an example scenario maybe where we help AVs in a work zone environment in Orange County, Florida, to show that how this type of public-private collaboration can be effective in solving the AV's challenges. I'll just simply share my screen quickly.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I guess since they're a member of the coalition of the willing that Secretary Cohen put together, we got to keep Florida in the game, right?
Mm-hmm. So here, an automated vehicle is recognizing a smart sign, and after recognizing it, it activates this traveler information message. This message contains information about the roadway, the road geometry data, and the vehicle now exactly knows how the road is changing in a work zone configuration. It's very difficult for autonomous vehicle to identify a detour in lane geometry in a very complicated special case scenario like this. So these are very great example case scenarios to help autonomous vehicles navigate safely. But at the same time, in this collaboration, we wanted to add something very useful to public agencies. The system is simply collecting data about the work zone, real-time data about the workers' presence, their geolocation information, and recognizing the traffic signage in the area. So this data could be also very much helpful for the decision makers to identify the challenges in deployment of autonomous vehicles in the future. So this was a very great example pilot for us to identify the problems we were facing. And then collaboration was very much helpful in this kind of projects.
The Vision Zero guy in me just sort of, my little heart went aflutter every time I saw the vehicle pass a person, be they a worker on the side or that dude who was over next to the white truck, the little audio alarm that went off at the same time. That's freaking awesome. And I love that. So, I mean, is that something that was, you spoke to the collaboration earlier, was that something that was baked in by you guys? Or was that as part of that discussion you had with the customer transportation element to develop that?
This was a US DOT funded project. We were simply testing our automated vehicle platform, communicating with the smart sign. So we tested the system in Orange County, Florida. In this work zone configuration, it was perfect scenario. So collaborating with the county government is essential to progress further, I guess, to solve the AV challenges.
Now, Jen, you've worked with a lot of communities. Certainly, Swiftly is quite active in multiple communities. Is that a similar dynamic that you guys are seeing? And what for you guys has been sort of that high hurdle to clear?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of different things, but I did want to just touch on what Eris said, thinking about kind of the public transit industry and some of the things that we're working on at Swiftly. One of the new products that we're working on is called service adjustments, where it basically can help transit agencies automate things like detours and other, disruptions to the service without kind of the human element of a supervisor going out there and driving the new route. And wouldn't it be amazing to have all of that data from those signs kind of feeding that platform? We have a lot of information now about what the road network is and where, what if a street is one way or whatever the situation is. But wow, wouldn't that be an exciting layer of data to be able to add in there? So that seems really exciting to me. But yeah, Swiftly is in place in over 80 cities around the world. And so, I think each city obviously has its own unique needs and challenges and priorities. And of course that changes just within the US. And then when we talk about Europe and Australia, obviously it can be very different too. But in all the cities that we're operating in, Swiftly is really focused on helping transit agencies just operate more efficiently in those cities and improving the overall efficiency of the city and a better customer experience for the passengers there. And I think one example of a product that we have that is really helpful with working with cities and municipalities is something that we call Speed Map. And it just allows the transit agency to see the speed that their buses are operating in every 25 meters. So that's really granular data that's really, really helpful. So it's helpful just on the transit agency side to kind of assess their own planning or operations. Like they might identify a choke point because of just a simple bus stop placement issue. And that's something that they can just go back and internally move and fix. But there's a lot of other much larger applications for that where they might work with the city to even just do like some quick spot improvements, like adjust a signal or add a queue jump in or add a new bus lane or a little bay for the bus to wait so that it's not stuck in the congestion. Or it could be something like really implementing a huge project where they're redesigning the whole cross section or a whole corridor to really make transit move efficiently. So that's one that we're really excited about, just in our ability to help transit agencies, our transit agency partners really work within the municipalities that they operate in. And we've seen great success with that kind of all over the world where that's being utilized.
Sweet. So Nick, here's the deal. I know data analysis was a huge part of what the entire Drive Ohio team talked about in a couple of different forums where I've been. And all three of our other panelists so far have talked about the criticality of data analysis. Is that one of the lessons learned that you guys have been evolving over since you took on the role at the infrastructure desks in 18, or have there been some other lessons learned that maybe were a little bit more illuminative, if that's a word?
So it's a combination of both, really. I'd like to mention, you mentioned Smart Columbus, winning the Smart City Challenge back in 2016. That was really a catalyst for, activity, AV and CV activity in the state of Ohio. I mean, it led to our first AV shuttle, running around, the Scioto Mile. And the lessons learned from that project alone, enhanced the ability on our future AV deployments. We learned about, how best to procure the AV shuttle services. There's a lot of challenges in that, being a government agency. The gas tax dollars have to go towards, maintenance and operation of our roadways, not necessarily AV shuttles. So we had some challenges to kind of overcome there. How do we overcome some of the public engagement challenges, kind of noting what those were, and then operational challenges, as these are electric vehicles, they have different operational abilities when it gets snowy, when it gets, when the road grades get too high, because you are talking about a shuttle type vehicle, not a, typical passenger commercial vehicle. So there's a lot of operational challenges that we had to overcome, and it was good to be able to realize those and use those as lessons learned for future state deployments. As far as data, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the Pivot app that was generated off of the Smart City project in combination with SGIS. They use that platform to as an application that brought all these different modes of transportation together into one platform and one phone app or mobile app. And then from there, you can order multiple different types of trips, using multiple different options, mobility options. And so that's already been, recognized and used and being open source, been used by other deployments in other states across the country. As far as what Smart City's done with their connected vehicle environment, there's lessons being learned there because they are truly the first that's deployed roadside units that are operational and onboard units and they've done that testing, and they're providing those lessons learned to our US 33 project, which is coming online, in the next month or two. They're making sure that we are aware of things that they've overcome, and they're also, since we're dealing with the same manufacturers, they're also addressing issues that we would have had to overcome in the future, and they're sort of clearing the way for us to be successful with that. Overall, I think where the future of mobility stands, utilizing that data, we're bringing all of our data into what we're calling the ESP, the event streaming platform, and here in the Ohio DOT. And what we're really trying to do is increase the safety first. Safety is one of our first use cases. And one of the use cases that I always throw out is, what if I could predict the probability of an accident occurring on a roadway? Based off of, a lot of these data silos that we have right now, breaking those silos and bringing the data together and analyzing it in a way that, I can take weather data, overlay it with traffic data, overlay it with vehicle data, and overlay it with, typical accident data. And now I can start to formulate this algorithm that can really make a prediction on when an accident is most probable to occur. And once I hit that threshold, it's a predefined threshold based off of, the when we want to take action. We can actually lower the speed limit once that threshold's hit, or if we don't have variable speed limit coverage there, we can actually dispatch law enforcement to make a more safety awareness to the motoring public. So that's just one use case that I see coming out of all of this data. As we're getting the AV data directly into the connected vehicle environment, I think that's the next step, making all of these AVs connected as well, and truly having a connected and automated vehicle. Automated vehicles typically see the local roadway around them, and then connected vehicles can see what they're going to traverse down the road. Maybe they can see a signal ahead. Maybe they can see 2 or 3 signals. Maybe they can see a corridor. And bringing all that information into the AV, now the AV is able to do things such as routing. If it knows that, hey, I can save 3 minutes if I go this other route because there's just some congestion ahead, then maybe it does that. And it does it based on a personalized basis, so that it's not rerouting everybody to go the same route, but it's rerouting you based off of your destination and endpoint. Overall, I think everything's moving in a great direction across the nation. And I just want to reiterate, Ohio's in this to be a partner with the other states and other, industry members to really, accelerate the AV readiness of our national infrastructure.
Awesome. Nick, I could not agree with you more. One of the things that, I continue to talk about here in Delaware and across the country is that there's got to be a why to what we're doing, right? I mean, everything we do should be about safety. Over 40,000 people die on US roadways every single year, and that number continues to go up. It's even going up even with COVID, you guys, which is just, to me, that's a public health crisis, in my opinion. But if we could use, because we're doing the same thing in Delaware, we've been working with Turner Fairbanks for a while. to do this AI, to do the predictive analysis, not only to detect a crash, but to make sure that, you know, we reroute and not, and Nick, you hit the nail on the head, and not just reroute everybody. You know, everybody's got Google Maps, Waze, you know, whatever, you know, mapping system that they're using. But the problem is what's happening, and I'm sure this is happening in other states and cities, is these maps, they're rerouting them into like neighborhoods. And you guys all know what's happening with consumer demand, you know, and what I call the army of a million smiling minivans with Amazon that are technically coming through neighborhoods. And what we're trying to do is not just predict crashes and prevent crashes, but making sure that the detours in the areas that we're sending folks is appropriate. One of the biggest complaints that we get from legislators is too much truck traffic coming through neighborhoods. So I think there's lots of safety things that we could do with AI, but also, you know, with that consumer demand, rerouting not just freight, but you know, potential detours in the right locations and not necessarily right down the neighborhood street.
That's awesome. I know that that kind of touches on what is the accepted conventional wisdom for where EVs are going right now. We actually did get a question from the audience. Lisa, and Lisa, please forgive me for being about ready to mispronounce your last name here. Nissenson asked a question a couple minutes ago. Is it still the conventional wisdom that autonomous vehicles have to operate in today's roads as they are? Or are there new designs, materials that simplify navigation to both y'all's points, along with bikes, peds, transit, like shared streets, slow lanes, those types of things? Enes and Genji, I think that's probably one both of you can handle. Enes, why don't you go ahead and take it first?
So hopefully I understood the question correctly. There are so many things we can do maybe to adapt autonomous vehicles on our roadways. One of the main things MUTCD is working on maybe changing the road line width of the road lines, so that autonomous vehicles can detect those lines more clearly. For our side, we are working on the changing the signs, maybe sending more information to those vehicles. So I believe there are so many things we need to change for our infrastructure to better assist autonomous vehicles. Hopefully the question was referring to this.
Yeah, and you know, I think that there are absolutely opportunities to continue to coordinate with the different types of mobility, and I think that that landscape is changing, and we all need to just be ready to embrace the changes. I think there are opportunities for certainly for transit and autonomous vehicles to share the same type of infrastructure, and I think thinking about what that infrastructure means, you know, that could mean a wide range of things. Maybe they don't necessarily share a lane, but they share the same traffic signal on a dedicated corridor, one lane over, or something of that nature. And I think we just have to be prepared as that technology progresses to really embrace that. And then, of course, you know, eventually even transit vehicles will be AV vehicles, hopefully. So, you know, starting work on that now to allow some of those AV technologies to come into those corridors that are, you know, ped, bike, transit currently, I think is a smart investment going forward.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add, you know, in addition to infrastructure changes, as far as, you know, policy, striping, things of that nature, I often talk about, you know, the concept of a smart mobility hub and how it engages in a community. And, you know, if you have a 2 to 3 mile area and it's serviced by a smart mobility hub, and these smart mobility hubs are spaced 4 to 6 miles apart, that can really bring community involvement and engagement together, as well as provide the functionality where the transportation model could ultimately change altogether, where you have a transit organization or transit routes running from mobility hub to mobility hub. Instead of stopping all those different stops along the way, it's actually running from mobility hub to mobility hub, and then taking a different form of transportation, whether that be a bike, a scooter, an autonomous vehicle, a taxi, or an Uber, you know, taking that to your final destination and utilizing, even in the future, looking at, you know, what an unmanned aerial vehicle could do at that mobility hub to service from city to city. Looking at that, you can really use that thing also as a community involvement piece where you can provide services such as a business center, a community education center for those underserved communities where they can't always get out. You can also use that for fresh food and stuff like that. So just bringing back that community center and offering multiple forms of transportation for the first last mile form of transportation is, I think, it's going to be key.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I see that you know, the transit industry certainly is already shifting in that direction by concentrating service on big corridors, able to move a lot of people at one time, and then shifting micro mobility type options. And I think they could be any of those options that you just mentioned, kind of last mile connection into neighborhoods, getting those big heavy buses out of neighborhoods and letting them operate more efficiently on the big corridors, and then coming up with other solutions to bring people to them. So I completely agree with you.
If I could add and jump in there, just because I just don't want us to lose sight of this. You know, we've all talked about the first mile, last mile, and, you know, yes, that could be microtransit, it could be bike, it could be, you know, Uber or taxi. But there's inherent inequities built into our existing transportation system. So if you know, women are still, you know, the number one, you know, caregiver of children and seniors. So you got to keep in mind that inequity still exists, because if I'm a mom and I've got a car seat and groceries, I'm not going to, you know, jump on a scooter, you know, to get home for that last mile. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of good technologies that's coming around based on, you know, trip planning, and not just trip planning, but type of trip and who is taking that trip. One of the other examples that I use, if I'm taking an elderly parent to the doctor, I'm also not going to jump on a scooter or a bicycle to get to that last mile. So I think just keeping in mind that those inequities for women and minorities do still exist, and making sure that we take a holistic approach to that first mile, last mile. But I think it is truly important.
And that actually leads right into the next question that we've received. And to your point, Secretary Cohen, my last boss, Mayor Sly James in Kansas City, you know, always would focus on what problems we were trying to solve. I think you and he share a perspective that the tech is the answer to the problem, that the critical role for the policymaker or the entrepreneur is to figure out what problem you're trying to solve. So for all four of y'all, what is the next big problem that you or your organization is wanting to solve? And in the spirit of so many of the comments that we've had in this conversation so far today, who else do you need at the table with you to solve that problem?
I think for our case, policy-related problems will be the most difficult to overcome, I believe. Coming up, supporting a new type of traffic signal equipment or traffic sign is going to take a lot of years to go into standards. MUTCD has recently updated their standard, and it does provide some new information about the autonomous vehicles. But this is progressing continuously, and new technologies will require new changes in the infrastructure. But this new change will be being reflected in a standard will take a lot of years. And this is one of the biggest challenges we are facing on our side.
Yeah, and I think that at Swiftly, that's really exactly what we're thinking about too. You know, we're thinking about shifting towards an open ecosystem model of data and technology. And so really whatever technology is on board a vehicle or whatever technology a city has, being able to ingest that data and make it meaningful and provide meaningful outputs for the users, whomever needs it to do their activity. And I think that is a big challenge, is just the data standardization. Right now, there are some areas of the industry data that's very standardized, so we've been able to accomplish that. But then in other areas, the data is not standardized at all, so it's hard to build a solution that works for everyone. So I agree that data standardization is the next big problem to solve.
And I couldn't agree with that more. I think, with our event streaming platform, we're looking at how to normalize the data automatically as it comes in, standardizing it and publishing those formats. And I also think that, one of the other large focuses that we're going to start with is, looking at freight movement and how AVs could affect freight movement with truck platooning, level 2 and level 4. Once we start tackling that, those lessons learned from that freight, automated vehicle technology, those lessons learned can be transferred down to the passenger vehicle and the shuttles, and how they recognize, things such as Inez has shown us how to navigate through a work zone. That's a big struggle right now on a interstate roadway, and if we can tackle that on an interstate with the limited freight participants and industry involvement, take those lessons learned and transfer them to city streets. Such.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of a different swing at this one, because where I sit from a public policy standpoint, and as an appointed official, that the public acceptance of this is a huge issue for us. And when I say that, we start talking about artificial intelligence, people's minds, they go directly to Skynet, right? We start talking about connected and autonomous vehicles, they go right to Minority Report. Sorry, my sci-fi nerd is showing, but that's actually that's where their minds go, right? So being able to, open up the conversation to think about the mobility options that this could provide for our senior citizens, our persons with disabilities. And then the dynamic that we're seeing across the country is our 16-year-olds, our new drivers, they're not rushing to the DMV to get their driver's license anymore, because I call them DSBs. They've been digital since birth, right? They've been connected since birth. So making sure that they're already connected, so they're not itching to get into a vehicle and drive themselves. So, keeping those different pockets of, who you're serving and why you're serving them and the options that this opens up for them. So I really think it's where I see the dynamic, and it's really framing the conversation around these technologies, especially when it comes to urban mobility and technology of the future. We really need to make sure that you manage the conversation. AAA has been doing a great job. They do surveys every 6 months to see, the scare test on how people feel about getting into an autonomous vehicle. And the good news is over time, it's going up. So that's good. That's a good sign. But I do agree that we're still years away.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. When we deployed our automated shuttle for the Scioto de Mayo, we actually brought on passengers that were complete skeptics of the technology, and as they rode it and they experienced it, they did a complete 180, and their comfort level and their comfort level kind of rose, and they didn't feel so skeptical about this technology moving forward. Of course, you have to explain to them with each deployment, this is a work in progress, and things are going to keep advancing. It's not 100% out of the gate.
Awesome. That inclusion of community groups, I think, is something that I heard Brenna talk a little bit earlier about in her fireside chat. Certainly, I heard a bit of it in this morning's plenary, was that engagement and that public engagement. I guess we have enough time for everyone to go through one more question, and that would essentially be, when you think about these publics with whom you engage and these stakeholders that are somewhat non-traditional, outside either, if you're a private sector person, the secretary or the director of infrastructure, or somebody in a department like that, who are 2 or 3 of those other stakeholders that you found that have maybe shaped your product development? And then on the public sector side, sort of what are some of these either smaller companies or entrepreneurial companies outside of the big firms that get the contracts as the usual 10 suspects? How have they kind of shaped y'all's journey into coming up with these smart solutions? Because obviously we put together a rockstar panel, put together some amazing things, and Jen G's up there giggling and smiling. We'll let you go ahead and kick off with this one.
I didn't mean to giggle. I apologize. Yeah, well, I was just thinking about your question and actually thinking about myself, because I used to be a director on the public side, and I came to Swiftly because it really was a technology that sort of revolutionized my industry. And I was really passionate about it because it just was like, of all the things I was doing, it made my job so much easier that I couldn't believe it. And so I feel like I am an example of somebody who adopted a new technology and then changed careers because of it. So, you know, I think that is an important shift, is these kind of smaller companies that are really changing the landscape and just making all this data that we've all had for so long that was not really accessible to us, just putting it right in everybody's fingertips, and in a few clicks of a button, being able to use that to make like really good decisions. So that's kind of my personal experience with that.
So yeah, I guess I'll go next with Drive Ohio. You know, we're heavily engaged with the upcoming workforce. So we often engage a lot with students and universities, and we have started up a capstone project and a capstone program where, you know, we'll take a few ideas that we have, you know, that are problems right now, and we'll present them as concepts to the students, and, you know, really get their perspective on, you know, what kind of solutions may be out there.
Yeah, I'd like to, the workforce issue is something that we're really strongly focusing on here in Delaware. And, you know, if you just think about the signal techs that we have working for us now that are handling signals, those aren't the same signal techs that you're going to need 5 to 10 years from now. So making sure that you have a pipeline of workforce that can actually handle the technology is super critical. But then again, one of the things we're focusing on in Delaware is, you know, a lot of these autonomous shuttle companies, for lack of a better term, you know, they want to not just sell you the vehicle, but they want to sell you like a subscription, for lack of a better term. So we're doing things a little bit differently. We bought our fully autonomous shuttles, and basically we're testing them. I keep saying we're going to break them, put them back together, break them, put them back together, so that we can create that in-house knowledge base. Because if not, it just becomes another kind of subscription or license with a technology company that has to come out and push new versions of things every time they have an upgrade. So, but really trying to take that in-house, I think has been key for us, and hopefully will show results in the future when it comes to workforce.
Okay, cool. So last question for the group here as we get ready to close out the session. Obviously, the title of our session was The Future of Multimodal Urban Transport. I know we talked a lot about scooters. We've mentioned AVs. There's been some tangential discussion about buses, and also things like streetcars or trains. About 1 minute-ish final thought from each of our panelists. Ennis, we'll start with you, and then we'll roll over to Nick, to Jen G, and then Secretary Cohen, you'll have the last word.
Thank you, Bob. For multimodal transportation, what we have been also focusing on as our application, our smart sign application, will not require any sort of wireless communication in the implementation wise. So that is also a very good use for rural areas where our buses travel outside of the urban area. They will suffer this problem that their connection is losing, and our autonomous shuttle, if they are traveling outside of the connectivity range, we still need to find a way to help them and help them to stay connected. And one way that we can help is to support this vehicular communication, this infrastructure to vehicle communication, with the help of these smart signs. We won't need to bring a fiber optic or power infrastructure to our rural road. We're simply going to put one of those smart signs, and hopefully will help transit buses or other multimodal transportation systems to travel safely while they are experiencing connectivity issues.
Yeah, for me, I'll go back to the the concept of the smart mobility hub, you know, and the multimodal application, you know, really being able to link different modes of transportation together at one unified or multiple unified locations where all of those services are available.
I'm going to tie this a little bit, my answer to kind of the pandemic right now, where we've like one positive thing that's come out of the pandemic. It's hard to say that there's a positive thing, but in a lot of cities across the country and even the world, we've seen kind of the streets taken back for people to enjoy them, to do a lot of things. And, you know, I just think about all these different technologies and projects that we've all talked about here, and really kind of leaning toward the future and thinking about the roads being a place for people to be, for them to be safe, for them to have a lot of different choices. And, you know, that's what I hope comes out of all of this new technology and improvement. It's just more enjoyable atmosphere for people to get from where they are to where they want to go.
Awesome. And I think, Jen, that's a great kind of point, because, you know, the future, it's about improving quality of life, right? That's what we're here to do. So we need to be smart. We need smart infrastructure, from signs to striping. We need smart technology from all of our data systems and all of the infrastructure that we've already built. And the days of building new infrastructure and new major alignments are pretty much over. It's optimizing everything that we have right now. I think that's key. And then we need smart people. We need a smart workforce. We've got to be prepared for the workforce of the future. So I'm super psyched to be part of transportation right now. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm very excited about it. And I want you guys to meet one of Delaware's 2 autonomous vehicles. So I normally would say, meet George Jetson. So this is one of our vehicles learning his route right now, and his name is George. We made him really stick out so people know that it is an autonomous shuttle and to look out for it. But again, he's learning his route. He's doing things great. And the future is George and Jane Jetson, believe it or not.
That is sweet. And what a great, I found out that my audio didn't failed to give you your background music there. I'm sorry, ma'am. But I would just like to thank this incredible panel. I think we've sort of gained a bit of an insight into what the future holds for us. Certainly, all of our points of contact are here on the conference website. By all means, reach out to us. And I will turn it back over to Cormac to continue this amazing event that is Move America. Sir?
Thanks so much, Bob. And thanks, everyone. Thanks to both Jens, to Nick, and to Enes. It was a great panel. Really, really interesting, as always. Coming up next, we do have a really great interview that Bob has conducted with Charles Fitak on integrating connected technology in Colorado. So do stay tuned. Maybe he'll post the Jetsons music in the chat. Who knows? Thanks all. Speak again soon.